Welcome back. I'm David Gura. Washington is still abuzz over the latest indictments in the Russia investigation, but that is not the only political news this week. There is, of course, the Playmate payoff detailed in the New Yorker magazine, Mitt Romney's return to politics, not to mention the looming deadline on immigration as March the 5th nears. There's a lot to cover here with Eddie Glaude. He's an MSNBC contributor and chair of the Center for African American Studies at Princeton. Ryan Williams is a GOP strategist, deputy press secretary for Mitt Romney's 2012 presidential campaign. And Wendy Osefo is Democratic strategist, professor of education at Johns Hopkins University. Eddie, let me start with you and that article that I mentioned in the New Yorker this week. Just read a quick excerpt from it, if I could here. This is about Karen McDougal, a former Playboy Playmate, alleged here to have had a relationship with Donald Trump before he became president. What the author of that piece writes is, her account provides a detailed look at how Trump and his allies used clandestine hotel room meetings, payoffs, and complex legal agreements to keep affairs, sometimes multiple affairs he carried out simultaneously, out of the press. What do you make of that article in the context of what we've read about President Trump so far?
Well, it's the latest example of Trump's questionable moral character. We've always known, I think the American voter has always realized that Trump was not a paragon of virtue. And so the question that we have to ask ourselves is what follows from this, right? What follows from this revelation? It's just further evidence that he's not a paragon of virtue? Is it a question of, with regards, for example, to the Stormy Daniels situation, is it a John Edwards situation? Did he pay her off with campaign money? Or is it a question of whether or not Trump is open to being compromised, right? Is he open to being leveraged in particular sorts of ways because of these backroom dealings? Or is it another point of entry? I'm giving us all these options. Is it another point of entry to thinking about his questionable character, which would lead him to and perhaps engage in questionable activities later on?
Wendy, let me turn to you,
arena.
if I could here, and just ask sort of how this changes the narrative for you. What we've read here, Eddie Glaude, they're bringing up that this is the latest in a very incremental story here. Is something different with this report?
Absolutely. A lot of people are hanging on to the salacious nature of this, saying, this is a porn star. But it's all about whether the president of the United States can be leveraged or compromised. Furthermore, we have to look at the other people who have come forth and said that Trump has engaged in not so courteous, if I could be honest, behavior with them. And that's the issue here, is that the president of the United States continues to have week after week women coming out of the woodwork saying that not only has he engaged in behavior that we would not think is becoming of the United States president, but also that he could potentially have paid them off. So now I think it's incumbent upon the DOJ to see whether this rises to the same level of Edwards, and to see, this money was paid a month before the campaign. So what's this done as a quid pro quo? If so, we're in a whole nother avenue.
Ryan, I want to ask about your former boss here announcing this week that he intends to run for a Senate seat out in Utah. I think we have a little bit from the ad that he prepared announcing that decision. Let's see if we can watch a little of that.
Utah welcomes legal immigrants from around the world. Washington sends immigrants a message of exclusion. And on Utah's Capitol Hill, people treat one another with respect.
That moment in that ad, I think, was so interesting, Ryan. Mitt Romney's not on camera for the bulk of that ad, most of the 2 minutes of it, but he is on camera for that statement in particular about immigration. I wonder what your sense is of the role that Mitt Romney's playing here as we head into 2018. How much of an outsider is he here in the Republican Party?
Well, Mitt Romney is a statesman. He's a leader in the party. He's someone who ran on a platform in 2012 that talked about respecting legal immigration and expanding it. So this is nothing new from him. But certainly the world has changed, and I think the governor is seeking to join the Senate as a person who could bridge the divide, not just between the two parties, but kind of heal the rifts within the Republican Party. He's a man of great character. He's someone who, as governor of Massachusetts, had to work with Democrats to get anything done, and I think he's going to try to at least be a unifying voice in the Senate if he's elected in November, which I expect he will be.
Eddie, I characterized him there as perhaps an outsider. What's the difference there between being an outsider and being out of step when you look at how he might fit into the Republican Party, how much influence he might have in the Republican Party today?
Well, I mean, that's a great question, David. You have to see this is Trump's Republican Party. It's not the Republican Party that Mitt Romney led in 2012. We have to see whether or not, I mean, Utah is a very interesting space. It's the site of a kind of Republican resistance, is ground zero to a kind of Republican resistance to Trumpism. But if he is elected, he has to go into the Senate. And what we do know is that Mitch McConnell and Republican senators are in lockstep with Trump's agenda. And so we have to wait and see. How will Mitt Romney establish his voice? What kind of voice will he have, or will he follow the party line? And that is not the party, the Republican Party, that is, Trump's party. Will he follow Trump's line?
Wendy, very quickly here, sticking with immigration, we were promised a great debate this week in the Senate. Four versions of an immigration bill were debated, not as vociferously as many people thought they were. What's your takeaway from that as we head here to March the 5th?
My takeaway is that both sides right now are losing, to be quite honest with you. I find it very disgusting that we have a president who came in and said, we don't want you to vote for the certain bill that was actually popular amongst the Senate and saying that was catastrophic. But then the bill in which he pushed forth, which is the Grassley bill, only got 39% of the vote. So we have to start asking ourselves, what are we really doing here? And what's really important is we have 700,000 DACA recipients whose lives are being used as a political football. We have to step out of the realm of politicizing issues like this and start saying, what are we going to do for comprehensive immigration reform? And right now, I don't think that immigration reform will happen in 2018 because of the midterms, but it's definitely something that needs to happen in 2019. And David, if I could say something really quickly, I think that we need to stop coupling issues. That's where we fall out of line. We start to package everything together, but we need to just vote on one thing. Let's vote on DACA, then we can address border security. Let's not package things together, because that's where the issue is.
All right, thanks to all of you. Wendy Osefo, thanks to you, Ryan Williams, Eddie Glaude as well.